And joining us now is Michigan Democratic State Representative Abraham Aiyash. He is the majority leader in the Michigan House of Representatives and is backing the uncommitted campaign in the state. We really appreciate your being with us, sir. I want to ask you out of the gates. Last week, organizers were shooting for about 20,000 uncommitted votes. Today, we're hearing 10,000 is the goal. For the uncommitted campaign, what would you view as success?
I think success would be record turnout. If you look at the concerns of the Democratic coalition, it is a multiracial, multi-religious coalition that says we do not believe the United States should be funding war. The United States should not be backing any initiative that is killing any innocent man, woman, and child. And we've seen that happen over the last 140 days. So I think tonight we're expecting to have a very strong showing, and we will see that once the polls close. We saw record turnout. I was proud to vote for legislation that allowed voting to happen early, and we're going to see the results of that tonight. So,
Leader Aiyash, just to be very clear about that, record turnout for whom? Record turnout overall, record turnout for the uncommitted number? Because the 10,000 goal that was set is obviously well below the number that it's been in the past. So just to be clear here, for whom are you looking to see a record, and what does that record need to be?
We want to see people turn out and vote. I think that is the ultimate goal. And what we are seeing,
even if not for the uncommitted,
Well, look, as somebody who's in politics, it's always a good thing to turn out and vote. But I will say you are going to see a significant number of folks turning out to vote uncommitted, which is why it's reflecting in the organizing efforts that we're seeing all across our state.
So let me ask you about what Governor Whitmer told us about the president's handling of the conflict just yesterday. I'll play that for our audience.
I have spoken with the president. I've spoken with a lot of people about it, and I keep very close with our Arab American community. I understand that, there is a lot of different feelings on this, and strong ones, and pain that people are feeling. And yet I also know that we have a president who is working 24/7 to try to bring calm to the region and peace to the region. He is, I think, working incredibly hard to resolve what is happening.
He's working incredibly hard to resolve what is happening. Do you accept that assessment, Leader Aiyash?
He certainly has not done enough. When you see 30,000 dead innocent men, women, and children in Gaza, and you saw that the president, for the large part of this war, did not speak out forcefully against the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, it is only now that we're seeing a shift in that messaging, and that's largely because of the organizing efforts that we've done here in Michigan and the conversations that we've had with the White House.
So to be clear, do you think he's responding to your concerns, though, that having heard the White House has had multiple meetings with members of your community during their visit?
More than having meetings, what we need to see is the White House must act on this issue. We have been very clear. A permanent ceasefire, ending the funding of these bombs that are killing innocent men, women, and children, and restoring humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza. That has been our position from the start, and we keep pushing for that, and we have yet to see that happen, and we will continue to push that through our efforts tonight and beyond as we enter the rest of this year.
So yesterday, the president said he's hopeful that there could be a ceasefire. He was specific. He said by Monday. If there is a ceasefire, or if this war ends before November, do you believe that uncommitted voters in Michigan will be willing to vote for the president, or is that relationship, in your view, irreparably damaged?
I think the way it's framed is not as transactional as I think many people want it to look like. It's not if you have a ceasefire, if you stop the killing, it's in exchange for votes. What we are saying is the president has not listened to the call of majority of Americans, 70+% of Democrats, 60+% of Americans that have said, we do not want the United States to fund a war that is killing innocent men, women, and children. So we are pushing back on that, and we are hoping that the president will heed the calls of his constituency, and that is the most democratic thing to do. And we are using this election today to send that message so that come November, there is not a conversation around, are there still people in Palestine undergoing a genocidal campaign by Benjamin Netanyahu?
So to be clear, as my understanding is, the president's right now, he says that Israel has gone over the top in its actions there. He's been trying to put more pressure on them. Obviously, that's not sufficient without a ceasefire for you. But just to be very clear, what specifically do you need to see, I know it's not as transactional as you just noted, to feel satisfied that the president has made significant change in the direction of what not just the Arab and Muslim American communities say, but a broad number of Americans are saying right now?
We've been very clear: restoring humanitarian aid, ending this unconditional funding to Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu's radical regime, and a permanent ceasefire to usher in Palestinian statehood and safety and security for all of those that live in the region. It's not a complicated ask, nor is it a radical ask. We are asking the United States to lead with peace, to lead with moral clarity, and to stop funding any initiative that is killing innocent men, women, and children, which we have seen 30,000 Palestinians have now suffered through. And unfortunately, every hour that goes by, 2 more Palestinian mothers die, and that is unacceptable if the U.S. is funding that effort.
One last question for you, if I can. You told Politico recently, quote, "It is insulting when people tell Arab and Muslim American communities that if you don't support Biden, you're effectively supporting former President Trump." If that is the ballot in November, isn't that sort of the way ultimately that it would be working, that if you're not supporting President Biden, you would be in effect supporting a Trump campaign?
Today, we're supporting an uncommitted effort to allow this president and this administration to change course on this issue. Look, my uncle was killed in an airstrike 3 days before the travel ban was signed. So if anyone knows the personal pain of President Trump's policies, it's people like me and people like my community. We recognize the danger of Donald Trump, and I know he's a threat to democracy. So the question has to be asked to the candidate, not to the voters. What is President Biden willing to do to protect and save this democracy? Is he going to listen to the will of the people, or will he continue to be a pacifist as it relates to allowing Benjamin Netanyahu to dictate whatever terms that he wants that has resulted in the killing of 30,000 people? So the question is for the president. We stand with democracy and not genocide, and I hope the president will do the same. We will stand with anyone that does that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Michigan State Representative Abraham Aiyash, I very much appreciate you making time to share your perspective with us. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.